Hey folks, we are recording at Chainlink SmartCon event, and joining me is Zach Rynes, who is the community liaison at Chainlink, also known as ChainlinkGod. How are you, Zach?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I had to call out your X handle because a lot of people know you as ChainlinkGod.
Yeah, the former frog on Twitter.
Zach, how did you find your way into crypto?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think different people have their different routes into crypto based on where their background was. I initially got into crypto. I saw online that you could run a program on your computer that prints money. And I thought, whoa, that's interesting. Like, I got to go figure out what that is. And I kind of fell down the rabbit hole from the GPU mining hobbyist type perspective.
Sure.
And so I jumped into Bitcoin, tried to understand why does digital money have value. And then I looked into the coin market cap list. And I saw that every token was on Ethereum. So I'm like, okay, what's interesting about Ethereum? And I learned about smart contracts. And then I saw that smart contracts weren't really all that smart. They didn't know anything about the real world. So if you were going to have some kind of mortgage on chain, how does that contract know anything about the house? So I kind of had this conception of what the Oracle problem was before I really knew to put a name with it.
Sure.
And then I eventually came across this paper that someone wrote about what an institutional smart contract would require. Right. And it was basically saying hey, Chainlink is the infrastructure that's going to make smart contracts actually useful at scale. Look at all their connections, look at the team's background. And from there, when I got fully link pilled is when I got fully crypto pilled. I'm like, okay, this is going to be massive. This is going to be huge. I have to, try and educate the world the best I'm able to. And that's how it kind of led to my Twitter account and then me educating and debating and arguing with people on Twitter. But, and it's just kind of snowballed from there. And so now it's crypto's absorbed my life at this point.
Oh, for sure. So you're all in on crypto, huh?
Oh yeah. Mentally, 100%.
We were talking right before the recording about the massive adoption Chainlink is getting and what a landmark moment we're seeing with Swift and DTCC and CCIP and how these institutions and banks are now looking to leverage Chainlink. What are your thoughts on that adoption?
Yeah, I think it's been fascinating because very early days, Chainlink's product market fit was DeFi through price feeds. So that enabled the launch of things like Aave and different apps have used Chainlink over time to create secure on-chain markets. But DeFi historically has been very insular or circular in that it's crypto applications for crypto natives to leverage and borrow and trade cryptocurrencies. And the vision of Chainlink I think has always been trying to bridge the traditional off-chain world with the on-chain world. And originally that context was price data, bring price data onto the blockchain so that you can enable lending applications and derivatives and these cool use cases. Right. But I think the end goal was always to unlock the ability for traditional institutions to issue their assets on chain and be able to use it within the same DeFi style lending, derivatives, trading applications. So, in the early days, Chainlink, there was some preliminary work with Swift and some, the institutions, but it was very early stage. But now, at the SmartCon and over the past few weeks and months, we've been seeing, institution after institution saying, hey, we're going to use Chainlink for digital asset transfer agency, or we're going to use it for market data, or we're going to do it for interoperability and orchestration. So Chainlink itself has evolved beyond price feeds to becoming this full developer platform.
Right.
And more institutions are starting to realize, they may not want to integrate with each blockchain individually, but they can come to Chainlink and get all of the connectivity to all the blockchains and create truly institutional smart contract use cases. And so I think the institutions are starting to really realize if they want to get into the space, they need something like Chainlink.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was thinking about Chainlink and how you have crypto native companies, you have other blockchain projects that are using Chainlink's features, plus TradFi. And you mentioned the orchestrator, right? And it's I just thought of a spider web, everybody's plugging into this network and Chainlink's allowing everybody to connect.
Yeah, I think people historically their conception of an Oracle and Chainlink was oh, it's just data, so it's a sidecar, connected to a blockchain and just pushes in data. And so people I think there's this perception that it doesn't really play a big role. But to your point, Chainlink is a facilitator or a connector. So you have this traditional finance economy, and then you have this on-chain ecosystem of builders and devs. And Chainlink's just the conduit that's connecting those two by providing the infrastructure that spans all the blockchains and all the existing systems so that builders can create applications, the institutions can tokenize and issue assets, and then they can seamlessly interop through the infrastructure that Chainlink's providing. So it's really just about creating this, Sergey calls it like a global internet of contracts, but like this interoperable ecosystem where DeFi and TradFi just become finance at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we're seeing this incredible convergence of TradFi and DeFi in the crypto world. And eventually, they're going to be so together, it's going to be, you won't even know the difference necessarily, because it's going to, the infrastructure is going to be, and the piping is going to be running behind the scenes. And the end user, rightfully so, they don't need to know, but it's just that it works, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they interact with blockchains directly, or like crypto natives interact with blockchains directly, but
Sure.
I think retail users aren't going to know what blockchain they're using at the end of the day.
Right.
Just that in the same way that people who watch Netflix or Hulu, they don't know what cloud service any of those applications are running on, and they don't really care, right?
Yeah.
And so I think Chainlink is always operated behind the scenes, where it's going to provide this critical piping and critical infrastructure, but the end user doesn't ever actually have to know that Chainlink exists, but it enables the applications that end users end up interacting with, whether it's payments or new financial on-chain markets that can be represented through the existing applications and brokerages accounts that people already use. So it's really just about upgrading the back-end system that these apps use.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your thoughts on Chainlink setting up the reserve, Chainlink Reserve, and what's the goal of that?
Yeah, so I think the reserve is really about driving long-term sustainability for the Chainlink ecosystem. So the reserve is this on-chain strategic reserve of Link tokens that on-chain and off-chain revenue is used to convert to Link and then stored on-chain for to support the ecosystem's growth over the long term.
Sure.
And so I think that the main thing that the reserve kind of signals is that as the adoption of the Chainlink network accelerates and there's more revenue created through off-chain deals with enterprises or on-chain service usage, that value ultimately gets redirected into the Link token. I think there's a lot of projects in crypto where the question of what actually accrues value can be a little bit confusing or a little bit murky, and there's different intentions from different projects. But I think with Chainlink, the reserve really makes it clear that the Link token is at the center of the Chainlink ecosystem.
Right.
And as the network effects accelerate, more institutions come on chain, there's more builders, then all that creates this flywheel effect with the Link token that just accelerates long-term growth and sustainability. So I think that's the main impact that I see with the reserve.
If I'm not mistaken, Chainlink is the only one doing that, right? Because I haven't seen any other projects do that, and I think that's a model that more projects should do, in openness and transparency, and showing kind of the, like you said, the accrual of value, but it's more community focused, right? Because you have that transparency versus it's locked up in a foundation, no one knows what's happening, that type of thing.
Yeah, we've seen more projects doing these type of like buyback model. Hyperliquid is an interesting case study of their derivatives exchange volume builds up this assistance fund. And I think what's novel about Chainlink's approach is that it's taking not just the on-chain revenue that people can see on-chain through stablecoin payments or native link payments, but it's also the off-chain deal revenue. So that's like with different blockchains via the Scale program and other initiatives that historically projects, you don't really see that revenue, and a lot of it's traditional legal agreements. Like the example I use is that if a bank or enterprise comes to Chainlink and says hey, I want to use your Oracle services, I need Oracle networks, but for whatever business or legal reasons, I can't touch crypto, I can't touch the Link token, I can pay in dollars. And is the Chainlink team supposed to say no, your money's not good here, go away? No, they're going to accept that revenue and then use infrastructure to convert that into the Link token and pipe it back into the ecosystem, abstracting away that whole process away from the institutions. And so I think that this kind of Chainlink calls it payment abstraction. I think this is one of the first case studies or one of the first examples that people in crypto are going to be able to pay for any service with any form of value. And then it's really up to the protocols to determine what to do with that value that comes in. So in the case of Chainlink, that's converting it into Link and putting it into a strategic reserve. I think other ecosystems are going to have to consider that, when everyone's paying for blockchain transaction fees and stablecoins, what does that mean for all the gas tokens that exist? That's just going to have to be a question that other projects are going to have to answer.
Yeah, well put. What are you most excited about for Chainlink next year, and even the crypto market in general? Because we got the market structure bill coming up, and that could have a big impact on the industry.
Yeah, I mean, the market structure bill, if the Clarity Act can get passed this year, that would be fantastic. I think that would create the clarity that the industry's been asking for very, very long time now at this point. What I'm personally excited by is one of the products that Chainlink announced here at SmartCon was the Chainlink Runtime environment, which is this developer platform where people can come to the Chainlink platform, write one piece of code, their workflow code, and automatically orchestrate an institutional style smart contract that spans any on-chain system, any off-chain system, Swift network, any external API, and orchestrate a really complex smart contract application within the Chainlink platform itself. So like historically, developers would come to a blockchain, they would choose a blockchain, deploy their application, and then come in and choose their Oracle as like an after-the-fact type process. And I think where things are moving is that more and more developers will first choose their Oracle platform, write the core logic of their application. That logic will run off-chain in an Oracle network, and then you connect to a blockchain for like final settlement and moving tokens around. So I think where developers are going to build their applications is going to shift from choosing a blockchain to choosing an Oracle platform that then kind of plugs into blockchains after the fact, and you can choose it in a very modular manner. So I think that that's going to open up a whole lot of institutional style smart contracts.
Right.
And then there's a whole lot of institutions coming in and choosing Chainlink and building on this runtime environment to kind of show the power of it and create these reusable workflow code that can be replicated by other people in a similar way that ERC and smart contracts have been historically.
Yeah, you mentioned institutions. We're seeing just incredible adoption from the likes of BlackRock and firms of that caliber, plus banks, looking to launch stablecoins, custody, trading, ETFs, and much more. What are your thoughts on how TradFi, they are, at one point they were against this and they were saying we're going to build our own private permission blockchain. Now they recognize public blockchains is the way to go. What are your thoughts on how they've been, coming into the market and building?
Yeah, I think there's been two complementary but two very different routes that they've taken. I think one is the TradFi serving crypto audiences, and so that is basically all the ETFs being launched. So BlackRock's IBIT is the most successful ETF launch ever. VSOL was launched just a few, I think last week, and that was like the fastest growing ETF launch of this year. So there's clearly a lot of demand for crypto exposure within an ETF type format, so you can buy crypto in a brokerage account and you can have a retirement fund. Like there's a lot of benefits. So I think TradFi's realized there's a whole audience of people who want to gain exposure to crypto as a new asset class, and they already have the legal wrappers in the form of an ETF that have become very popular over the past 10-20 years. And so that's like a new source of revenue for institutions. And then there's the other angle, which is institutions starting to bring their existing assets on chain and provide that to the crypto natives. And so that's like BlackRock and their Buildle tokenized money market fund, and Fidelity's has a money market fund, and the UBS just recently launched their tokenized money market fund together with Chainlink, using the Chainlink platform for subscription and settlement. So you can subscribe to a tokenized fund using existing Swift off-chain fiat payments. So kind of bridging these two worlds. So I think the main advantages there is global distribution. Anyone can access these assets across the world, and the programmability, the collateral mobility, where you can deposit these assets within DeFi contracts, use them as collateral, borrow stablecoins against it, and you can move these assets for less than a penny in under a second. So just the underlying efficiencies that tokenized assets bring. So it's really this two-pronged approach of providing access to crypto as like a new asset class, as well as using the underlying rails of crypto to issue your own assets as a complementary approach to the natively issued cryptocurrencies.
Right. Man, it's a brave new world with all these things that are being built and innovated. And I'm curious to see what the market is like in 2030, not from a price standpoint, but just adoption and seeing some of these things running through the economy and the markets, and people across the globe can access them and leverage them. It's, like stable coins and tokenized assets. People who couldn't access some of these like stuff on the New York Stock Exchange, maybe in a tokenized format, can maybe access it in countries in Africa, Latin America, and much more.
Yeah, I think stablecoins are like the primary best example of that, of the ability to transfer a stable unit of value between any address, anyone in the world, at any time, 24/7 for basically nothing. Like that is a very liberating thing. I think some people in the West, like, they don't necessarily realize the power of that, because like the U.S. has a fairly decent financial system when it doesn't break. But if you're in a country with a uncertain legal system or a shaky banking system, getting access to a stable currency like the dollar when your local fiat currency is inflating at 10, 20, 30, 100% inflation per year, you want access to dollars, but in the traditional system, they either don't offer it, or it has like a fake exchange rate, or they confiscate, or they, there's all these like tactics that, that could be done by more authoritarian regimes. But if you have a stable coin, nobody can prevent you from accessing stablecoins, you know, and they're digitally native, so they are very easily imported into different countries. So I think stablecoins will grow in adoption massively, and this current U.S. administration is very, very pro stablecoin, both from like the dollarization of other countries as well as, you know, this is a net new purchaser of U.S. Treasuries. So, you know, if there's $1 trillion of stablecoins, there's $1 trillion of U.S. Treasuries within stablecoins, which is, you know, good for funding the deficit for the U.S. government. So, like, stablecoins are very beneficial and very aligned to the U.S. government. It's very beneficial to institutions who want to provide new financial products and want to undercut the incumbents. And for everyone around the world, it's just a way to access a dollar in a more superior format. So I think stablecoin, in my opinion, is like the Trojan horse of people starting to understand the value proposition of tokenization as a concept and smart contracts as a technology. So like once you experience the benefits of a stablecoin, you're going to want that for every asset. Like why can't I trade stocks 24/7 over the weekend? Why does it take, you know, a week if I want to transfer assets around between different accounts? Like it should just be instant. So I think people will come to expect the benefits of stablecoins for every type of asset and every financial interaction that they have.
Yeah, and they're putting so many things on the blockchain, you know, stocks, equities, precious metals, and eventually be real estate. So maybe, I don't know if this is a bit off, but eventually individuals can start tokenizing things that are rare, of course. And if there's a market for it, you know, have liquidity around it, and that could open up a lot of opportunities for people.
Yeah, I think we've historically what people are kind of focused on is like if we can take existing assets and tokenize them. But when you have like a tokenization toolkit, and you have the global accessibility and the programmability, you can create entirely new types of asset classes that are kind of hard to imagine, you know, like tokenizing someone's time. So you can kind of have a new way of issuing salaries to people. Like it's hard to imagine new use cases in the same way that it was hard to imagine all of the possible use cases of the internet in like the early 90s, right? Like you can kind of imagine some of the use cases, but if you think of email, that was like a very simple, basic use case. And so think of stablecoins today is very exciting use case of blockchains, but it's also like the email use case of blockchains, just moving tokens around. So like when we have this tokenization toolkit, there's going to be a whole new set of assets that we can't even imagine today that are going to be issued and circulate around the economy.
Yeah, for sure. Zach, great stuff, my friend. And thank you so much for joining me. And I'm going to continue to engage with you on X as we talk about Link and much more. But, you know, appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
This episode is brought to you by VeChain. VeChain is one of the top layer 1 enterprise blockchains in the crypto asset class, and they are getting adoption by many big brands and companies around the world who are building Web3 and decentralized application technologies. I've been a VET token holder for many years. In fact, I started investing in VeChain back in 2018. And some of the key features of the VeChain blockchain includes it's secure, affordable, scalable, fast, and sustainable. Some of the companies and brands working with VeChain include Givenchy, Walmart China, BMW, Boston Consulting Group, and many more. Most recently, they partnered with Dana White in the UFC, and Dana White even said recently that he purchased over $1 million of the VET token. And VeChain also recently launched staking, where you can stake the VET token and earn great rewards. So if you'd like to learn more about VeChain, go to vechain.org. Link will be in the description.